For years, something was taking shape behind the closed doors of America's naval weapons programs. No dramatic announcement, no public countdown. Then, suddenly, a name emerged into the open: AIM-424 Malice, a long-range air-to-air missile designed for a battlefield where seeing the enemy first could mean everything. At the 2026 Tailhook Symposium in Reno, Nevada, the U.S. Navy finally acknowledged what many analysts had been watching for: AIM-424 LRAM long-range air-to-air missile. The weapon was no longer just a rumor. America had officially put a name to it. The name itself sounds almost deliberately threatening, Malice, but behind that name is a very practical military objective. The Navy wants to push its air-to-air reach farther into contested airspace, giving carrier aircraft more options before an enemy aircraft ever gets close enough to threaten the fleet. Then came the photographs: a Navy F-18E Super Hornet carrying 4 AIM-424 training missiles, and another image showing the weapon associated with an F-35C Lightning II. Suddenly, Malice wasn't just a designation on a document, it was appearing on real aircraft during the testing process. But there is a detail many people could easily miss: the missiles under the Super Hornet carry blue training markings. They are AIM-424 captive air training missiles, so this isn't proof of a live combat loadout, but it is strong evidence that the weapon is being integrated and evaluated with Navy aircraft. The F-35C photograph may be even more significant. An AIM-424 appears inside the fighter's internal weapons bay. That matters because internal carriage is crucial for maintaining the F-35's low observable design. A long-range missile is useful. A long-range missile that can work with a stealth fighter is another story entirely. And then we reach the number that changed the conversation. The U.S. Navy lists Malice's range as greater than 250 nautical miles. That's more than 463 kilometers on paper. That places Malice in an extraordinary range class, but there is an important warning: maximum stated range is not the same as guaranteed combat range. A missile can theoretically travel hundreds of kilometers, but the real battlefield is far more complicated. The target may maneuver, electronic warfare may interfere, sensors may lose the track, launch conditions may change. So when you hear 463 kilometers, think capability envelope, not an automatic kill at that distance. Malice is physically large. Navy specifications put it at approximately 13.5 feet long, with a 13.5-inch diameter and a weight of roughly 1,500 pounds. That's a serious weapon for an aircraft to carry. Its size immediately tells us this missile was designed around reach, not close-range dogfighting. The Navy identifies a solid-propellant rocket motor as Malice's propulsion system. Beyond that, the public information becomes much thinner. Exact seeker technology, detailed guidance architecture, and other performance characteristics remain undisclosed. And in weapons development, what isn't being said can sometimes be just as interesting as what is. The contractor behind Malice is Raytheon. The company has decades of experience developing advanced missile systems for the United States, but Malice is being positioned as something different: a next-generation long-range air-to-air weapon intended to work across multiple generations of naval fighter aircraft. The Navy's ambition can be summed up in 3 words: first look, first shot, first kill. It's a simple concept, but modern air combat makes it incredibly difficult. Finding the enemy first is only useful if the aircraft can convert that information into a credible engagement before the enemy can respond. Imagine standing on the deck of an American aircraft carrier in the middle of the Pacific. There may be no land for hundreds of miles in any direction. The carrier's survival depends on layers of aircraft, ships, sensors, and weapons. Malice is designed to extend one of those defensive layers farther outward. For the F-18E and F-18F Super Hornet, greater reach could mean more time and space to respond to distant threats. But don't confuse the test photographs with a confirmed operational loadout. The Navy has not publicly established exactly how many live AIM-424 missiles a Super Hornet will carry in combat. Now combine stealth with long-range weapons. The F-35C can penetrate contested environments while reducing its radar signature. If it can also employ a missile capable of reaching targets hundreds of kilometers away, the aircraft could potentially engage threats without exposing itself unnecessarily. That is the concept behind the combination. Malice is not being designed only for today's aircraft. The Navy says the missile is intended for 4th, 5th and 6th generation platforms. That brings the future F/A-XX program into the story. In other words, Malice is being designed with the next era of naval aviation already in mind. The old image of aerial combat is simple: 2 fighters see each other, close the distance and fight modern warfare is different. Satellites, radar aircraft, ships, drones, data links and electronic warfare can shape the battle long before pilots ever see one another. Malice belongs to that new battlefield. The real battle may happen before the missile even launches. One sensor detects something, another confirms it, a network builds a track, a pilot receives the information, then comes the decision. Malice is being developed for an environment where information and distance can matter more than visual contact. A long-range missile becomes far more powerful when it operates inside a larger sensor network. A fighter doesn't necessarily need to see everything by itself. Other aircraft, ships, and unmanned systems can contribute information. Exactly how Malice will use those networks remains classified, but the direction is clear. For decades, the AIM-120 AMRAAM has been one of America's most important beyond visual range weapons. Malice enters a much larger range category, but direct comparisons can be misleading. These missiles were designed for different requirements, different dimensions, and potentially different engagement scenarios. And Malice isn't the Navy's only move toward longer-range air combat. The AIM-174B has already demonstrated America's interest in pushing air-to-air engagement distances outward. Malice adds another piece to that puzzle. Together, these developments suggest a future naval air wing built around multiple layers of range. More than 250 nautical miles, more than 463 kilometers. That is the official range figure everyone will remember, but serious analysis needs context. The Navy has not publicly stated that an aircraft can be reliably destroyed at exactly that distance under every combat condition. The number is real, the interpretation requires caution. Already, online headlines are calling Malice an unstoppable aircraft killer that goes beyond the evidence. The Navy has confirmed development and published specifications. It has not released a guaranteed kill probability against specific enemy aircraft. The difference between military capability and internet speculation is enormous. We know the weapon is called AIM-424 Malice. We know Raytheon is involved. We know its approximate dimensions, weight, propulsion and warhead type. We know the Navy claims a range beyond 250 nautical miles, and we know it is being developed for multiple generations of aircraft. But the most important questions remain unanswered. What exactly is inside the seeker? How does the guidance system perform at extreme range? How resistant is the missile to electronic warfare? What is its true engagement envelope? And when will it become operational? Public information doesn't answer all of those questions yet. A missile weighing around 1,500 pounds creates serious engineering challenges. Every aircraft has limits. External carriage affects aerodynamics and potentially stealth. Internal carriage requires valuable weapons bay space. The fact that Malice has been associated with the F-35C's internal bay makes that integration effort particularly interesting. For AIM-424s under a Super Hornet look impressive, but that image should not be mistaken for a confirmed combat configuration. Training missiles are used during testing and integration. The photograph proves the Navy is evaluating the weapon on the aircraft. It does not reveal the final operational weapons loadout. Malice is a striking name for a weapon, but the real significance isn't the name, it's the philosophy behind it. Keep the carrier farther from the threat, give the fighter greater reach, create more time for the pilot, and force an enemy aircraft to consider the possibility of being engaged long before visual contact. Now look at the Pacific. The distances are enormous. Carrier aircraft may operate hundreds of miles from their ships, and enemy aircraft can also launch weapons from far away. In that environment, range isn't simply a number on a specification sheet. Range can become time, space, and strategic freedom. But one question remains unanswered. How effective is Malice at extreme range against a maneuvering target? Public information doesn't tell us until realistic testing reveals more. Nobody outside the program can honestly claim to know the missile's full combat potential. The biggest part of the story is still hidden. The missile's potential targets may extend beyond enemy fighters. Long-range air-to-air weapons can create problems for high-value aircraft supporting an enemy's air campaign. Early warning, intelligence, and electronic warfare platforms could become increasingly vulnerable if they operate within the missile's effective engagement zone. Look again at that F-35C weapons bay. The significance is not simply that a large missile can fit inside, it's what the combination represents: stealth, sensors, networking, and long-range weapons working together. If that architecture matures, naval aviation could control the distance of an engagement in a very different way. Malice is therefore more than a missile. Its success will depend on aircraft integration, software, sensors, communications, testing, maintenance, and trained crews. A weapon can look extraordinary on paper. Turning those specifications into reliable combat power requires years of testing, evaluation, and refinement. So the real story isn't simply that America has revealed a missile capable of traveling more than 463 kilometers. The bigger story is the direction of U.S. naval aviation: longer range, greater survivability, more networked warfare, and weapons designed to keep enemy aircraft farther away from America's carrier forces. Now the spotlight moves from the announcement to the test program. Can Malice deliver the range? Can it integrate with stealth aircraft? Can it operate through electronic warfare?
And can it turn extraordinary distance into reliable combat advantage?
Those are the questions that will determine whether Malice becomes a revolution or simply another promising weapon. Malice represents something much bigger than another missile entering the American arsenal. It represents a new distance game in air warfare. The Navy wants its aircraft to detect threats earlier, engage them from farther away, and remain protected for longer. If Malice eventually delivers on its promise, an enemy aircraft could face a serious threat long before it gets close enough to threaten the carrier. That changes the geometry of the battlefield. The question is no longer simply who has the better fighter but who controls the distance. The headline number is extraordinary, more than 250 nautical miles, or more than 463 kilometers, but that figure needs context. Maximum stated range is not the same thing as guaranteed combat engagement distance. A real engagement depends on launch conditions, target movement, sensors, guidance, electronic warfare, and countless other variables. So yes, the Navy's range figure is real, but what happens at the extreme edge of that envelope remains one of the biggest unanswered questions surrounding
Malice. The test program will ultimately provide the evidence.
The Navy has not publicly named a specific enemy aircraft as Malice's target officially. The weapon is described as a system for fleet defense and dealing with advanced threats, but the strategic logic is easy to understand. In a future conflict, the most valuable aircraft may not always be fighters. Early warning. Electronic warfare and intelligence platforms can influence an entire battlespace. A weapon with extreme reach could potentially force those aircraft to operate farther from the fight or
accept greater risk every time they enter the battlespace. The photographs tell a story of their own. Under the F-18 ER-4C AIM-424 training missiles, not confirmed live combat rounds. That distinction matters, but the image still shows active testing and aircraft integration. Then there is the F-35C, with AIM-424 appearing inside its internal weapons bay. Neither image proves an operational combat configuration together. However, they demonstrate something important. Malice has moved beyond a theoretical concept and into the real-world development process. We know the basic numbers. Raytheon is the contractor. The missile is approximately 13.5 feet long and weighs around 1,500 pounds. It uses a solid-propellant rocket motor and carries a blast-fragmentation warhead. The Navy claims a range beyond 250 nautical miles, but the most important technical details remain hidden. Its seeker performance, guidance architecture, electronic warfare resistance, and actual combat envelope are not fully public. Those details could ultimately determine whether Malice becomes truly revolutionary. For now, one thing is certain: AIM-424 Malice is real, and the US Navy wants it to change the way its aircraft fight at long range. It is being developed for today's fighters and tomorrow's sixth-generation platforms. The weapon is not yet something we can honestly call a proven combat game-changer. That verdict will come later, through testing and operational evaluation, but the message is already clear. America is preparing for an air war where distance itself could become one of the most powerful weapons